Greetings, I'm Rodger Newbold, and welcome to this episode of Experienced Photography. My fellow photographer and the editor for this episode is Matt Rich. He has stowed himself away in the edit room. Are you there, my friend?
Hello.
Good. You know, this is the kind of day I live for. It's so exciting. This is going to be something a little different, a little new, and we're really pleased to be back with you today. You know, in our past episode, we spoke about a real simple piece of hardware, the lens hood. We showed many different types of hoods and how they could be used for you. Today, we're going to talk about a particular shooting technique or style called minimalist photography. And we want to express how to say more with using less. Minimalism in photography, as any art form, helps us to accentuate the main subject by eliminating many of the unwanted elements that are surrounding and in the nearby. Today, minimalist follows on the coattails of the 1880 pictorialist movement. At the time, photographers were meant to get an artistic look rather than just a reproduction of what was in front of the lens. Now, today we offer a choice in how to see and how you photograph. The photograph is usually taken by focusing on one simple subject or a very small group of comparable subjects, or perhaps a group of similar colored or similar tone subjects within some composition. A minimalist photograph stands out since it's easier to understand what the photographer wants the viewer to see or to know about his or her particular image. Minimalism is like a simple sentence where you focus on one subject. Nothing against literature that uses exquisitely completed sentences, but not every sentence has to have 20 words or more. A photograph with too many elements is like the complex sentence. It leads the viewer on a convoluted explanation. And if you don't know how to compose a properly complex sentence, it just looks like a big mess with poor punctuation. Now, I don't mean that you should only take minimalist photographs. A photograph with several elements is in the frame, is common, is just more difficult to compose. And I believe variety is usually a good thing. Now, when beginning students ask me, well, how do I make good photographs? I tell them, just keep it simple. Yep, keeping it simple works. But why? And that's what we're going to take a look at. You may take photographs because you instantly perceive something interesting that fits within the frame. And second, you may craft a good photograph based on some concept or idea that you had been entertaining. These two approaches are easier to deal with since distractions may be eliminated before clicking the shutter release. Another practice arrives not from being immediately aware of all of the unwanted elements in a frame, but it discovers the possibilities of the image in post-shooting reviews. Now, the unwanted elements can be distracting, and things that are diverting the viewer's attention in too many directions, the photographer has learned how to tidy up the frame in post-production. And that's an important part. After the fact, often as more problematic solutions, but don't overlook the fortunate gifts presented to you. So when I capture something that's out in the field, it's not what I initially saw. I will try to work with it and simplify the image and the composition down. Now let's take a look at this first image. It's a concept image. It's something that I actually thought about. I shot this picture out on the Bonneville Salt Flats Raceway. Now, many world records of over 1,000 miles an hour have been set here by different types of cars on this course. And I was sitting there and enjoying the sunset, and I couldn't help but think of the speed that the drivers had encountered ripping down this piece of salt. And how to create such an image would require in-camera movement technique. And this is where the camera is rotated on the tripod head at a slow shutter speed, somewhere around 1/8 of a second. The simplified singular shape of the out-of-focus hills denoted the speed that the drivers may have witnessed. It's about cherishing what we value and removing all of the other distractions. Now, color was intensified, and I did that in post-production. It was there, but I intensified it to enhance the sunset. Now, this image concluded with a feeling of mood. Yeah, mood. And more than actual facts that we normally associate with a photograph. It's about what I was feeling and what I saw and what intensity came to me. Now, the second image shown here is an intermediate recognized image, and it's extremely well crafted by Matt. This grouping of small plants, man, their attempted freedom from a sand dune in Death Valley, California, was established and made a striking minimalistic composition in camera. Everything that was not needed was observed and abolished or cropped out before the shutter was released. Now, cropping is an important thing. I run my eye around my viewfinder to see what is there, what's hanging in there, what sneaks into the corners. Crop it, move in, out, back, forth, zoom. I don't care how you do it, but crop it, get it right whenever you can in the camera. Now, Matt carefully controlled the color in post-production to retain a limited intensity and a narrow scale to preserve the image and the harmony. Now, this third image coming up is an experimental concept. Experimental. This soaring triangular form is incredibly demanding, even though in a singular and minimal, it took a little bit of imagination. Since the form occupies the bulk of the space and it's pushing out to the top of the frame, it is expected to be recognized. And the building texture is being so weathered, suggested a senior and ever-changing sage voice of experience. You know, the astronaut Neil Armstrong recorded, "I believe every human has a finite number of heartbeats, and I don't intend on wasting any of mine." Being minimalistic in no way diminishes this life's understanding. It merely simplifies the path to growth and surviving. Now, to aid in minimalistic genre, I chose a monochromatic presentation in post-production. And by abstaining from color, the viewer only has to deal with the textures and the shape and just trying to keep it simple. Our fourth image, it's a burned pine and crescent moon. You know, for many, many years, Matt lived in residence at Jacob Lake Inn at Jacob Lake, Arizona, right near the Grand Canyon. Since his ownership employment status landed him virtually at the edge of the north rim of the Grand Canyon National Park, it made photography really happen easy for him. One evening, driving across the Kaibab Plateau through a recent forest fire burn scar, Matt spotted this lonesome, burned-out tree. Retrieving his photo equipment, walking a short distance, he was able to isolate the crescent moon alongside the tree during making this daunting silhouette. And at 9,000 feet in elevation, the sunset appeared brisk and beautiful. That's a fine, minimal composition. And the exposure is made and lives here for us to enjoy. Remember, hey, keep your eyes open. Keep your camera handy. And keep your muse at your side. I think that's important. Number 5, this next image is a straightforward shot. It's across the shallow water towards almost a mirage-like view of a single dark mountain. The line that is formed from camera to the peak supports the form in art terms. And water is the most precious commodity in the desert. And the summit hardly dares to breach across the surface. The great thing about a minimalist image, there's limited choices to observe. The viewer now must decide, what is the subject? A thin veil that stands between two opinions. It's all about finding the calm and thinking about what's my response to that. The mind is like water. When it's turbulent, it's difficult to see. But when it's calm, everything becomes clear. Life is 10% of what you experience and 90% about how you respond to it. So keep calm. Think differently. Do your research so that you'll know what are the issues, what are the options. You know, you can only hear what your own soul has to say. Now, Westerners, those of us that live out here where there is no water, all know that this picture is about the water. Number 6 is a rainbow and clouds. The eastern exit from Jacob Lake and the Kaibab Plateau takes you to an interesting stretch of US 89A towards the House Rock Valley, Arizona. The elevation drops really rapidly over 2,000 feet in just 20-mile distance, and it comes to a fine pull-out and viewpoint, which exposes an expansive panorama and the dazzling Vermilion Cliffs at the Paria Canyon Vermilion Cliffs Wilderness area. One evening, there was a recent storm passing by. And, you know, Matt's lived there for a while. He predicted what was to follow. He hopped into his vehicle, cruised down the familiar byway, and arrived just in time for the anticipated performance of the rainbow and clouds. Now, this fleeting rainbow and grandiose cliffs accented the harmonious colors of the sunset and the little post-production enhancement that was needed. It always gratifies me that Matt is able to tell a story so concisely, and it gives us a great lesson in being prepared, watching what's coming up, being ready. Now, when attempting to make an image in minimalist style, a lot of things have to go through your head. In mine, a couple of them are that, do I have to travel a long way? Do I have to go miles and miles to get this photograph? And what kind of special equipment do I need to do minimalist photography? I think these are both great questions. I'm sure you asked yourself that as well. The answer is a great big maybe. Sorry. The following picture pair, you'll notice that no special equipment was used. And I simply, walking through my backyard, I traveled at least 20 feet when I noticed the pegs on the clothesline. Now, my first attempt was to, compose and remove unwanted elements. And you can see picture A. In that picture, it worked. It was shot with a long lens, 135 millimeter, and only at f8. I focused about 6 feet out, attempting to rely on a kind of a narrow depth of field to control the long lens and isolate the pegs. But that, just standard equipment. And I took the shot. Now, in view B here, I added a very inexpensive glassless extension tube between the camera body and the lens. The job of an extension tube is to allow the camera to focus closer to the subject matter. Therefore, depth of field becomes really narrow and precisely controlled at a much closer camera to subject distance. It becomes measured in inches rather than feet. And this began to result in a more minimalistic image. Now, the extension tube, it was about $30. It's not much. But they can range as much as up to $150 if you buy a name brand and where you buy it and what your store, and if it has to have electronic connections and all kinds of links. But I got this at a retail outlet, and the pricing program they had was pretty reasonable for simply hollow tubes that vary in length. You don't need to go to great expense. It's not really super duper special equipment. Well, maybe. You had to go out and buy one. But I keep a small tube for each camera body that I have, just in case I have to make a real close-up image and in a very inexpensive way without real special equipment. Now, the next picture is trees and snow. I travel in my backyard and I find clothespins. Matt slips on his snowshoes and walks out his backyard, and he's in a stand of trees covered in fresh snow in his yard. Atmospheric conditions quite often aid in isolating subjects from an otherwise intricate or convoluted environment. Snow or rain or fog all promote minimalism in photography. When you're lucky enough to witness these prevailing conditions, take advantage of them. Often, atmospheric conditions bring along their own attendant color palette. So keep things simple, go with the flow. Snow reflecting the blueness help contribute to that frosty condition that takes its hint and exploits the offered color rather than post-productioning some image to absolute death. Now, photography is a way of seeing, and the world can certainly become a way of life. Most people just look around. They never take enough time to really understand or observe or even appreciate the world that they're looking at. Learn to feel the light. Use it to describe the world where you're photographing. Share the joy of finding the extraordinary in the ordinary. Find clever designs. Seeing, especially in minimalistic sense, takes practice. So adventure forth with purpose. It's all about the photographer imparting a emotional response and improving or sharing what they see in their life. So get out there and make some new images. Be brave. If you don't like what you shot, erase it. Who cares? Now, Matt and I hope we've given you some really valuable information. So please subscribe to our channel. Give us a big thumbs up. If you found this information constructive, tinkle the little bell. It will notify you when new material's published. And most of all, keep those comments coming in. I really hope that you see our vlog as a two-way vital discourse. It goes between you and I and all of us, and it becomes an important roadway to learning and expressing. Thanks for tuning in today. So until we meet on the old screen again, thumbs up. Bye-bye for now.